Take a look at this. This is Tucker Carlson talking about critical race theory, specifically in the context of the Virginia election.
Well, exactly, nicely put. I mean, these ideas aren't just annoying, they're poison, and they end with Rwanda, and anyone who thinks it through understands that. If you wanted to unite the country, which badly needs to be united, you would emphasize our equality of value. We may be different in many ways, and we are, but we are all worth the same, period. And anyone who doesn't believe that should not be within 100 yards of power ever.
Okay, so teaching critical race theory, which they don't, will lead to Rwanda. This is a point that, look, Tucker Carlson as a person is very impressed with basically everything that he says and does, but he's very impressed with himself about this particular point. And I know that because he also made this point back in June, just about anti-white fervor in general. This wasn't about critical race theory. This is just in general, they're anti-white and thus America will become Rwanda. But actually, he was also saying it way back in 2018. He said that the Democrats are just being like the Hutu of Rwanda. He is very, very impressed with himself. But again, let's be very clear about what he means here. He is never saying it explicitly, but all he means is they will come for white people. They will rampage through the streets. They will kill you and your beautiful white family. That is a message that he has been consistently spreading for at least 3 years at this point.
There it is. And I mean, and he talking about bringing the country together. The venom that he spews night after night is in no way bringing the country together. And that's such a bizarre comparison for somebody to make. Look, all of us, each and every one of us, from the Tucker Carlsons to just the everyday person in neighborhoods, in the hoods and neighborhoods all across this country, have an obligation. And what is that obligation? That we come to an understanding. James Baldwin once talked about how not everything that we face can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced. And there is nothing wrong with facing in this very moment the very real deep-seated challenges that we have as a nation that are rooted in race and they're rooted in class. And sometimes they're rooted in gender or sexual identity or religion. That is real because humanity is complex. And just as humanity can be incredibly wonderful and beautiful and loving to each other, we can be incredibly brutal and evil and toxic and manipulative and use systems to hold certain people down. And let me tell you something, Tucker Carlson and the people who believe in him are in a fantasy world if they want to continue to rewrite history. At the time of the founding of this country, whole folks were enslaved. Hello, at the time of the founding of this country, the indigenous people of this land, their land had been stolen. You want to talk about genocide? They died by the hundreds of thousands, even millions, at the hands of European settlers. And we're about to celebrate Thanksgiving this month, John. Let's go on and tell the truth about it. Yeah. And somehow that kind of truth upset these people so that they manipulate and then they fear-monger. And then there's some people more wired and predisposed to believe it's what you just said, John. They coming for your stuff. Well, what about the stuff that they already stole from other folks? Jesus, why can't we have that truth? Somebody said, I don't know whose quote this is, but it was, they better be happy that Black people want justice and not revenge. Mm-hmm. That's real. And any other, that kind of oppression, but to stoke people up like that and not be willing as a leader, as somebody that has the kind of following he has, and he's talking about power and the kind of power he has, he wants to continue to stoke up fear and paint other people as the other. It's really shameful what Chuck Tucker is doing. It's beyond that, but it's a family show. But he knows exactly what he's doing, John. He's doing it for ratings. Yeah. He's doing it for money. He has very high ratings, has a lot of followers, and God knows, hey, the money definitely is flowing in on that show.
That's true, yeah. Yeah, and he's doing it for his own financial gain, but in a larger sense, he is doing it to protect billionaires, to protect those who are already in power. I mean, at the end of the day, like, they are weaponizing conservatives to win elections, but it's not the conservatives that are gaining power. It's not, because those conservative voters have actual issues that will never be solved if they get the politicians that they support. Effectively, this is a war to keep us out of power on the left, definitely, but to create apathetic conservatives who will never push for politicians who will actually improve the quality of their lives. They have been effectively pushed out of politics because you made the great point, and you referenced Baldwin there about, you can't solve something until you face it. They have an easier job than we do in that they're not asking their voters to face anything. We are. That's difficult. Right. That is a difficult path that we have to face. But they don't have to ask them to face anything because they don't want to change anything. The voters should. It's in their economic interest to change things, but those in power do not. The billionaires are doing just fine. They don't need any reckoning with their history. The history did well by them. That's how they got their billions. And so we have to overcome all of that and get people to do the difficult work of understanding how they're being manipulated and the history of our country. And that is a very difficult thing. I don't have a solution to that right now, but we do have to figure that out. We can't just defeat a talking point about critical race theory because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. These people don't actually know what they're talking about, and they really don't care either. What we have to do is wake them up, not just about the history of the United States, structural racism and all that, but about the fact that they are being manipulated every day by people who do not share their interests, that use them as pawns to maintain the status quo. And that is a lot to get people to wake up to. And I honestly don't know how we go about doing that, especially in the short term. But I feel like we're never gonna have any sort of progress until we do that.
Yeah, I agree with you, John. Maybe one good start, and this is hard work. I mean, this is really gut-wrenching hard work, and as much progress as certainly I must admit that we have made as a country, we still have to deal with the structures, and that is really a harder lift. But one thing, looking at the strikes that are going on across the country and how those really are, multi-generational, multiracial, the coming together of working class people standing up for their rights, whether it's John Deere or fighting against Kellogg, just to see what Amazon folks trying to come together to unionize. To me, there's something there that I believe we can cut across the political spectrum, because the people who work at those kinds of facilities, the working class people, they are Black, they are white, they are Latinx, they are Asian, they are everybody in between. That might be it, John, that we bring, in a stronger way in the 21st century, the whole notion of labor and civil rights movement merging together.
Yeah, and I think that it would be really helped along by actually having some successes in terms of legislation. Like people do not believe that the government can deliver for them, and they believe that because it basically never does. We have to break through and show what can happen when the government actually does care. And unfortunately, the defenders of the billionaires, the Manchins and the cinemas, virtually every other Democrat and every other Republican have made that an almost impossible obstacle to get past, to actually deliver in even the most minimal way on promises that got them elected.
So true. I mean, we haven't even passed the PRO Act yet, speaking of labor.
Yeah. And that's one thing that supposedly Manchin's actually in favor of. We'll see if that actually produces it or makes it get passed. I also want to remind you, by the way, if you are living in Buffalo, New York, India Walton in a race, totally like the exact parameters of it, needless that we're going through this at this point. She won effectively, but they are all arrayed against her, just like we were just talking about. In the case of India Walton, we interviewed her on the show if you want to find that video, but there's Bernie Sanders encouraging people to go and vote. Polls are open until 9, 6 hour time. For more political news, breakdowns, interviews, stories of activism, and me trying my hardest to care about the occasional big celebrity news story, subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/The Damage Report. And you can ring the bell wherever it is so you don't miss anything.